one question.
Sure.
You'd said that these fish, you know, you'll have like a pond near another pond, and these fish don't even intermingle. Like they wouldn't appear over here at all. There's like no way it would happen.
Well, okay.
Are these fish like aggressive towards each other?
Well, no, they're utilizing the habitat in different ways.
You know, sometimes the species gets moved by man or by other means.
Well, that's a good point. And
you know,
we're talking about evolution of fishes and things in the Amazon. You got to remember that the Indians frequently fish in small streams with a poison called barbasco. Well, that's all fine and dandy now that in the entire Amazon there's probably less than 300,000 Indians. But in pre-Columbian times there were, you know, tens of millions of Indians. And the Amazon was over most of it was put to agricultural use with a high population. They were poisoning a lot of streams. A lot of the recent speciation that we see may be due to species moving back in to a habitat or having been isolated because of an incident. Huh. So man may have played and be playing a part in the evolution of Apistogrammas. There's really no significant damming of the waters or anything in Venezuela, or at least where I live in the Amazon. Logging is illegal. There's no mining permitted. The entire state is basically a wildlife preserve.
This one area that you can't get into to collect like the blue-eyed cosmos and stuff like that, that's like a government-run organization?
Those are the government, or the communist guerrillas.
Oh, it'd be a bad idea to just go in there.
No, they don't kill you. They just take you hostage, and they don't torture you or anything. But you have a really miserable 3 or 4 years until somebody can figure out how to pay them enough money to let you go.
Just to catch fish.
Yeah. They let some ornithologists go one time because they got sick of hearing about birds, and they figured these guys definitely can't be CIA. All they do is talk about birds. After a few months, they let them go because they convinced they were really there to look at birds. Overall, you know, they did kill a very famous Colombian fish collector, and that's when everything stopped. That's when they killed him, and he was operating out of the Puerto Inirida there in Colombia. Interestingly enough, that species is only found in that river, that Apistogramma neridae. It's only found in that one river. Getting back to species coexisting, sometimes you'll find species absolutely mixed in a habitat, like the four stripes and the broadbands and some of the white seams. You'll catch those mixed in the same habitats. But things like hongsloy, they tend not to really like the leaf litter so much. So when I was collecting the hongsloy, I'm not really collecting them with say the broadbands. The broadbands would be over in the leaf litter. So they're really utilizing habitat in 2 totally different ways. Huh. And there's
it's just like they can't even interbreed because they're like just different.
Yeah. Now, how are the Apistogrammas? They're related outside of the Apistogrammas from that area. Well, of course, they're going to have a lot of relations with fish in the Rio Negro. So the Pratensis complex really has its basis in the Rio Negro, and its closest relative is the Agassiz complex, which is pretty well known to people. And then the broadband complex also apparently seems to be mostly Orinoco, Rio Negro based. And then the McMasterite complex is totally only in the Orinoco drainage. So.
Question. So you talk about isolated species, but this sounds like there's a lot of flooding. So you'd have
there is a lot of flooding, and that figures into the survival strategy of different species. My experience has been, okay, in areas where the jungle really floods for a great distance in, my experience is you never find Apistogrammas in that habitat ever. They stay close to the main channels. They don't move around much. They may move as root masses are inundated. They may move up the stream bank utilizing root masses as their habitat, the little caves and hiding areas in the root masses. They're just moving up and down. They're not spreading back into the forest. It's almost as if they're paranoid about getting caught out in the dry season. So tetras and fast-moving fish, you find them all over the forest.
I was just thinking like in rainbow fishes where they had isolated species due to geography, so you don't ever see like evolutionary steps towards to?
Well, it's a complicated situation because, like I said, about the time that the Lago Amazonas really started draining through the Amazon, that coincided with the last period of glaciation, and water levels around the world were about 300 feet lower than they are today. There's a species called Hoyniae, which you find up at, which is in the McMasterite complex, which you find up in the Llanos and the savannas, and they probably evolved in isolation around the base of the Andes Mountains, what became the Andes. There was a lot of, where you got mountains, you're going to have water. And that may have been the refuge for them when the water level went down. So they evolved independently from the other McMasterite. In Colombia, we have a really, really fascinating instance, which is there's two species that are visually very difficult to distinguish, Viejita and McMasterite. What happened was as the water levels went down, there was a watershed that was not very high, but it was enough to separate the populations for a significantly long enough period of time, where on each side of the watershed, they evolved independently enough to where they only recognize their own species, they don't interbreed. Now the water level's gone back up, and you have both species living sympatrically, but without interbreeding with each other. They're very closely related. Like I said, they're hard to tell apart visually. They're a very interesting set of circumstances.
When you bring these species home and you have them in your aquariums to breed them, what type of conditions do you set up?
Well, that entire area is known for water that is extremely soft and acidic. Hardness is not measurable. There's virtually no electrical conductivity whatsoever. And the pH values range from about, say, in the blackwater habitats, like where the Apistogramma apezis come from, pH values are 4.3 to about 4.8. And the water literally is the color of coffee. I wish I had pictures of it. Unfortunately, I didn't have a camera for a good part of my time there, so I don't have pictures of all the habitats.
What are the temperatures in the water?
Good question. That varies seasonally, depending on the rain, the flow of the water, how fast it's moving. In general, about the coolest I ever felt the water there was probably about mid-70s, low 70s, about as cold as it ever gets. And then the highest it gets is a little bit over 100, I would say. A lot of those lagoons, where especially the ramps are absolutely thick, are shallow lagoons that get very, very hot, and they shelter in the water hyacinth.
I'm just curious, did you see any crenocichlid in there? No, these are kind of backwater.
No.
environments?
Yeah, well, crenocichlid, oh yeah, there's a tremendous number of species. We have one, there's two species there that are dwarfs. One's called Wallacei, and the other one is doesn't really have a name yet, but it's like a Reagani notophthalmus variety type. It's a smaller one. We have a number of larger ones too. There's one that they call the Venezuela strigata, which is a really pretty fish.
It's in the same habitat as the pistos, or is it more like the deeper water?
Well, the dwarf species, you find them absolutely sympatrically with the Apistos. And I haven't determined yet if they actually feed on small enough Apistos, but I have a feeling that they're not. The feeling they're feeding on the shrimp, the larval shrimp. The larval shrimp are the basis for all the food chains in the Amazon that I've examined. That's it. There's shrimp everywhere, huge numbers.
What about in the lagoon?
And a lot of species.
Then you have a lot of Daphnia blooms with the cow patties.
Yeah, I don't know about Daphnia blooms. There's certainly a huge variety of really small organisms. But another thing I have to remember is, you're dealing with pH. That lagoon, the pH there was about 5.2, no measurable hardness. It's hard for insect larvae to live there. Mosquitoes can't live in water that's that soft. They have to live in places where there's frequent enough rainwater to keep the pH high enough for them to be able to live. And when you're in really true blackwater areas, there's no mosquitoes at all. There's these other blood-sucking insects that are worse. So, and the leeches are always fun too. Electric eels, that's what I'm most afraid of bumping into, just because God, that hurts. And you can incapacitate, you can drown. They don't kill you with a shot, but you become paralyzed.
Well,
You know, you
freshwater
can drown in
rays.
the water. And these things get 9 feet long. They get huge.
They give you a charge, huh?
Yeah. I've seen a few of them in clear water, mostly when I'm doing night collections, which are fun because you got things like aquatic coral snakes, anacondas, caimans are out. You can see the caimans. You should have seen Wayne Lytle. I don't know how many people you know Wayne Lytle. He's afraid. He didn't want to go in Onion Creek because he thought there were alligators in it. You should see Wayne down there trying to catch fish. That's fun. I go, oh, look, there's an aquatic coral snake, man. And Wayne's like up on the bank. I'm like, Wayne, there's more dangerous stuff up there than in the water. At least here you can see what's going on. You know? And the electric eels, the inside of the mouth is red, just like crimson red. And it's really a very interesting animal.
You ever been hit by one?
No, personally, no, but I know plenty of people that have.
It's just kind of, something you recognize when you see it easily, or is it pretty
Well,
well
yeah.
camouflaged?
Well, like I said, if you see them in clear water, you just avoid them. We found this one that was probably 7 foot long in Pozo Azul one night. We were collecting Satanoperca at Damon and Satanoperca leucosticta and Biotodoma wavarini and Hero severus, the true severum. And there was this one that's probably a good 7 foot long, as big around as my leg. And there were these Indians that were just spearfishing at night, and they were debating whether they were going to shoot this thing. And they finally blew it off. They didn't do it. So nobody was willing to shoot it and then drag it out of there.
Yeah.
You can always find out for yourself, so take a field trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Indians are generally really nice. There's a couple of other things I was wanting to show you all. I'll do it then on the slide. I will. There's a species I didn't mention, which is Apistogramma species montepiari. It's a really, really small species. It's this one here on the bottom. Really small species in the Pratensis complex. And the interesting thing about that is I caught a reproductive female that was brightly colored for breeding, and she was probably less than a 1/4 inch long. It's probably one of the smallest of the Apistogrammas. The one above that is that one from Cataniapo that I was showing you earlier.
1/4 inch.
This is an interesting in the, right here that's in that broadband complex. And first time I collected these, Wayne Lytle was there. And you'll notice that like the 3rd dorsal fin trigger is really, really tall. On broadbands, all the dorsal rays are extended like that. But in this one population, a place called Caño Saco, only the 3rd dorsal trigger is really extended like that. Otherwise, very, very similar to a broadband. And on the top is that one that came from San Antonio. On here, I'm calling it Araoides, which is the name for the macaw parrot. And sounds like a good Latin name to me. But when I initially collected the specimens, you'll notice how many lateral spots there are. And right in front of the caudal peduncle, you see there's a square spot. And that really hasn't shown up on the F1s that were bred, but a tremendous number of the wild specimens that I collected looked like that. And frequently, fish don't look the same in captivity that they do in the wild. Sometimes I'll collect fish and I'll collect a good sample, and we'll get them into captivity, and after a few months, they just color up differently. They just don't look like the same fish. Pattern's different. Could be diet. That one from San Antonio that I collected, when I collected them, the backs were a beautiful green color. And they lost that green in captivity. The first generation didn't show it at all. So they're so adaptable, and they change so quickly that even within one generation, they can start adapting and changing. Fascinating group of fish. I wish there were somebody more interested in doing the taxonomy, because there's so many new ones, and there's so many people working on saltwater. Everybody wants to be a marine biologist, but the heyday of freshwater biology is past. That was back in the 1800s. Nowadays, everybody wants to be a marine biologist. That's a real problem. Well, that's my presentation. I do thank y'all for having me. Hopefully I can expand it, make it a little more interesting, and get some better pictures in the future. But thanks for having me.